This is an Ice Guys Patreon exclusive.
Welcome to another NHL team season preview video here on the Ice Guys. 32 teams in 32 days. Ian Cameron, Alex B. Smith, and we are here to talk Pittsburgh Penguins. And to do that, it is a familiar face and voice to a lot of you that have been watching the Ice Guys and listening to the Ice Guys show for the last few years. Now, we haven't seen as much of her the last couple seasons, but there's been reasons for that. Sometimes life intercedes, work intercedes, and being a mom and having a family intercedes as well, and that's what she's been busy with the last couple of years. But we got her with us here to talk Pittsburgh Penguins, her favorite team, Melissa Cunningham. Good to see her and good to have her with us to help talk Pittsburgh Penguins hockey for the upcoming season. Melissa, it's good to see you.
Thank you guys for having me, and I'm happy to be back.
No, we're happy to have you back. Give us a little life update for Melissa Cunningham. Go ahead.
Yeah, Carter is now 2.5. He's telling everybody his favorite sport is hockey. We're working on him saying his favorite player is Sidney Crosby, but my husband is trying to get him to say Bedard, which I'm not very happy with, but we're getting there. And I am actually 38 weeks pregnant as of right now, so I am due to deliver hopefully soon, maybe in 2 weeks. And then we'll have a nice long maternity leave, and hopefully we'll be a little bit more active this year in the chat, and looking forward to, those late night feedings and looking up stats and listening to you guys too.
Yeah, we were wondering when we scheduled Melissa as a guest, would she be able to get on this show before the baby arrived? And thankfully that is the case. Yeah, the baby inside you there said, you know what, I'm going to be nice and I'm going to do everyone a solid here. Let's make sure we get Melissa on that Pittsburgh Penguins preview video. I'll wait and be patient and bide my time, right?
Yes, so tonight it's coming.
Well, as long as any time after the second we end this show. Yeah. Welcome to arrive.
All that matters.
Exactly.
I'm happy to talk Penguins all day.
No doubt at any point. So let's get into it with the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is a very interesting team coming into this season. Obviously, I don't think Kyle Dubas knows what he wants to do, and I know damn sure that the core of this Penguins team, what they want to do, and they still believe they can be contenders, at least to make the playoffs and go from there. They want to. And Sidney Crosby, who has just signed, by the way, an extension with the Pittsburgh Penguins right before the start of training camp, 2 years, $17.4 million contract extension for Sid here with the Penguins. He was apparently part of the, process in terms of getting this done was a promise to Sidney Crosby that they would try to go for it and push to win and push to, contend. And I understand that. And I think that's probably something he needed to hear to stay in Pittsburgh, because I think deep down inside, even though he wants to end his career in Pittsburgh, he also wants to be competitive. He wants to be in the playoffs. He wants to try for another Stanley Cup. And I think his desire to stay in Pittsburgh for the whole career is evident. But I just don't know still if he is going to have the best possibility to contend and win that next Stanley Cup here in Pittsburgh with the way this roster is and with the long-term outlook. When you are a team and a franchise like the Penguins and you're contending for the Stanley Cup and you're in the playoffs every year, it just absolutely eats away at your draft capital. It eats away at your prospect cupboard, because that's the shit that you're trading away every single season to add to the roster at the trade deadline to make that push to be a playoff team and a Stanley Cup contender. So that's the issue with the Penguins. They have a very bare prospect cupboard right now, one of the weaker ones in the NHL. They've traded away a lot of draft capital. And as a result, they're in a state where they're kind of in between. And that's not the spot where you want to be when your prospect system is just so thin right now. And so that's the issue that the Penguins have to overcome. As far as the team this season, we know long-term there's probably going to be some issues because they just don't have a great prospect pool right now. And they've just traded away draft picks left and right the last few years. But when you look at the roster, there's holes galore. When you look up front, Sidney Crosby and Brian Rust, they've got good chemistry. There's no question about that. You don't have any issues with that on your top line. What is kind of eyebrow raising here with the Penguins here in training camp is that they've currently penciled in Anthony Beauvillier to be on the left wing side of that top line, with Sidney Crosby and Brian Rust. And that's an interesting decision because we are talking about Anthony Beauvillier that since 2022, he was traded from the Islanders to the Canucks, and it's just been, he's seen his offense dissipate. Last year, 3 teams he spent the season with, Vancouver, then Chicago, and then ended the season with Nashville. 5 goals, 12 assists, 17 points in 60 games for Anthony Beauvillier. And you're asking him, maybe, potentially, if this is correct, if this is going to stand on an opening night to be a top-line player. We were saying before the recording, Sidney Crosby can still deliver magic at 37, and he showed it last year, almost carried the Pittsburgh Penguins last season. But I don't know if there's enough magic in his repertoire to carry Anthony Beauvillier to a bounce-back season on the top line for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So that is going to be something to monitor. Who's going to fill that left wing side? Beauvillier, and if it is him, can he step up and deliver? And if not, who's it going to be? Michael Bunting's been pretty solid the last couple of years. You know what you're going to get from him. He's going to go to the front of the net, be a pest, score a lot of his goals that way. Evgeny Malkin is a player on that second line with Raquel. Raquel, I like. Malkin is someone that I thought last year he ended up with 67 points in 82 games. That's pretty solid, and he was a point-per-game player 2 years ago. So Evgeny Malkin still does have something in the tank. I think a lot of his offense came later in the year. He did have a slow start last year. He's going to have a better, October, November this year than he did last year. Bottom 6 is a big mystery to me. And we'll definitely hear what Alex and Melissa have to say about it. But, you've got Lars Eller, veteran center. He's going to be good both ways of the ice. He's not going to light it up offensively, but you could do worse. They're buying low on Cody Glass repair, Cody Glass replace. Cody Glass from the Nashville Predators, who, look, he fell out of favor. There's just too many players ahead of him that were playing well, that were producing offensively. It was not a great year for Cody Glass, especially down the stretch last year. And now Pittsburgh's kind of given him an opportunity to flip the switch, a change of scenery that they hope will do him good and be beneficial for the team as well. The one bright light in their bottom 6, and he's right now slated to be maybe a third liner. He probably should be even a top 6 forward based on the way he finished the season, is Drew O'Connor. I thought Drew O'Connor really showed me something last year for the Penguins. I remember taking a few big plus 300, plus 400 goal props on him down the stretch. He had a career high 16 goals, 33 points in 79 games. That doesn't look great for the overall numbers, but a lot of that came late in the season. He really started to find it and find an offensive groove, if you will. And if he can deliver that more consistently over 82 games this year, that's a good thing for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So keep an eye on him. There's 2 new faces that'll probably play on the fourth line, Kevin Hayes and Blake Lizotte, 2 veterans. Lizotte's played his whole career with the Kings in that bottom 6, fourth line type role. So he's very familiar with that. Nola Chari is also back. He's going to be a good physical player, great penalty killer. Defensively responsible. How much goals you get from him is another question. That looks to be your fourth line for this Pittsburgh team. Emil Bemstrom, who they got from Columbus last year in the Alex Nylander deal. Jesse Puljujärvi is not even in the top 12 forwards, 4 lines to begin training camp, and I understand why that is. So I keep him there. That's what I say. Keep him there with Jesse Puljujärvi. Connor McDavid can make a broomstick play good hockey with him. He couldn't make Jesse Puljujärvi play good hockey with him. That tells you all you need to know in Edmonton. So I don't mind Jesse Puljujärvi being an extra forward here for Pittsburgh. And you have to keep an eye on Rutger McGroarty. It's actually a nice little trade, Dubas. And Dubas has made some mistakes, don't get me wrong. But bringing in Rutger McGroarty from Winnipeg, he didn't want to stay with Winnipeg. He's now with the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll keep an eye on him. He'll probably push for a roster spot in training camp if he has a good camp. So Rutger McGroarty, someone you're going to want to keep an eye on. As far as the blue line, Marcus Pettersson, Erik Karlsson, Chris Letang, Ryan Graves, all returning. The new face on that blue line is going to be Matt Grzelcyk. And Matt Grzelcyk's had a great career, right, with the Boston Bruins. Pretty solid on that blue line. But here's my concern, guys. Boston Bruins, I trust they know what they're doing when they make decisions about their personnel, especially on the blue line. Why? Because they've had one of the better defense corps and blue lines in the NHL for 10 years, 15 years now? When they weren't that interested in Matt Grzelcyk coming back, that's like red flags galore for me. And it tells me that maybe the Pittsburgh Penguins aren't going to get the best version of Matt Grzelcyk, at this stage of his career. And last year, his offensive numbers dried up. Again, he's an older player now, into his 30s, right on 30, I should say. But again, last year missed some time due to injury. The offense disappeared for him. A lot of wear and tear. He blocks a ton of shots. He's going to give you that, steady in his own end. But, when Boston's not keeping you, that's definitely a concern. I'm very interested to see what this young kid can do on the blue line. He got a lot of opportunity second half of last year. What will he be able to do this year? We've got Jack, Ebony, and St. Ivany. Jack St. Ivany for the Pittsburgh Penguins on the blue line. I liked his game. Now, again, I got to see more. It was a small sample size for Jack St. Ivany in the second half of last year, but good puck mover. 3-year deal he got on a two-way contract back in May. We'll see what he can do with more opportunity, but they like him. All I've heard is they really like Jack St. Ivany from the moment he started with the Penguins late last year. So we'll see how he fares this year. Probably going to get a full season now with the Penguins. He's currently probably going to be on their third pair to start the regular season. And then in net, look, I thought they were going to part ways with Tristan Jarry. I thought the time was right to maybe move on, and it didn't happen. Didn't materialize. And so Tristan Jarry and Alex Nedeljkovic returning as the two goalies here for the Pittsburgh Penguins, status quo. And behind them, you've got Joel Blomqvist. You've got Philip Larson. So it's going to be interesting to see how the goalie situation, but it's probably going to be Jarry and Nedeljkovic once again, year 1-2. And look, I've said it about Nedeljkovic. He was really good with a good Carolina blue line, but you didn't see him play as well with Detroit, weaker blue line. You didn't see him play as consistent with Pittsburgh, weaker blue line. And then Tristan Jarry, just not good enough or consistent enough last year. Easily very much concerned if he's going to be the guy you have to rely on in net this year. 903 save percentage, 1925 record last year, and 6 overtime losses as well. So that's definitely a concern what Pittsburgh's got in net. I've got to put the thumbs down on Pittsburgh. I don't think they're making the playoffs. I think they're not sure what they want this roster to be this season. What I do know is I think what's concerning when you look back at last year, guys, what we didn't think would be an issue for Pittsburgh was scoring goals. And yet here they were, just middle of the pack offensively at 3.09 goals per game. And even more insane and head-scratching was the fact the Pittsburgh Penguins, out of 32 teams, had the 30th ranked power play last year. How many times did we fucking criticize and rag on this power play last year? How on earth do you have a Crosby, a Malkin, a Letang, a Carlson, who's been a power play magnet on the blue line his whole career, and you can't muster up a halfway decent power play? And your power play has a stretch where you went, 0 for 38, I think, at one point during the regular season last year. How is that possible? With what was supposed to be the strength of the team was a power play, and you'd be able to score goals. And they didn't even do that well enough last year. And then defensively, they weren't very good either. So that explains why the Pittsburgh Penguins had a tough year last year as well. So I look at this group, and I think the offense will improve this year. Has to, with some of the collection of talent they have. But I think they're still going to be a below-average defensive team, and you're probably still going to be able to cash in betting some overs this year involving Pittsburgh Penguins game totals. Alex, we'll turn to you. Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, this team is they're a mess. That's the way I kind of look at it. You look at what Kyle Dubas coming in. He's supposed to be kind of the guy to lead this team to one more push for a Stanley Cup before having to blow the whole thing down and rebuild. Well, now you have all this money tied into Tristan Jarry, a goaltender that you can't rely on consistently throughout a whole season or postseason. You just simply can't. And now he's there for the next 5 years. You've got Sidney Crosby. God bless him, one of the best players in NHL history. An absolute legend, but he's sticking around for 2 more years in his late 30s, getting $8.7 million per year. You've got Chris Letang tied up until he's 42 years of age. You've got a bunch of guys who are on the wrong side of 30 with long-term careers and a lot of money tied up to where Pittsburgh can't even do anything, even if you have injuries to these guys, which is just natural, especially when you talk about players in their late 30s. They go down long-term. You have nothing in the cupboard, and you have no way of making any kind of significant moves to bring someone in to fill in those gaps via a trade, even if you have 4 teams involved. There's some trades that Pittsburgh is not able to make. So it's a really bad situation. If this was game 1, round 1 of the playoffs right now, and everyone was healthy, I'd say this is a somewhat dangerous Pittsburgh team. But the fact they've got to go through months and 82 games of play, I don't see this working out well for the Penguins at all. How does Mike Sullivan still have a job with this team, to be honest? I think his seat's got to be burning up hot right off the get-go. If they lose early, he's out of a job before American Thanksgiving. And then now you're looking at bringing in a new coach when you're supposed to be trying to win, according to Dubas making this promise to Crosby and the veterans. You're supposed to be winning in the next 2 years, and now you might have to make another coaching change if you don't get things rolling between now and November. It's just an absolute mess. The roster says they're ready to win a cup right now, and then you look at the prospects, it looks like it's going to take them another 8 to 10 years to rebuild. I mean, there's really no one, like I said, you mentioned all the prospects that are worth a damn. They're all in the AHL. There's not really much to gloat about in juniors or over in Europe amongst this group. Bloomquist being one of the goaltenders that of note that we'll probably see in a couple of years. And once again, he would still be more than likely backing up Tristan Jarry when he's ready to come up to the NHL level. So I got Pittsburgh under 90.5 points, minus 122 at FanDuel. There's no value on betting them to miss the playoffs. It would be in their best interest to absolutely tank out. There's 3 teams I've said this about now: Minnesota, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh, that if they tanked out this season, it would probably be in their best interest. Could be as soon as next year to where they would be a better team. But with Pittsburgh, because of how everything's tied up, especially with the draft picks and their capital, I don't really see, if they don't win now, they're a team that has to go for broke here this year. Because if you don't win now, when are you winning again? When are you going to have all the pieces put in place together? And of course, things are different as the salary cap's going to go up over the years. You'll have free agents and you'll have spaces that'll open up. But it seems like it's going to really be another 6 or 7 years before Pittsburgh can compete with free agents of this caliber again. And another 8 to 10 years before they can rebuild the cupboard to having. That's the key with Pittsburgh and how good they were for the last 15 years. It wasn't just Crosby and Malkin and different guys on the top lines. They were able to plug and play different people. Brian Rust was a product of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Came up, did his time in Scranton Wilkes-Barre, and came up, and now he's become a top 6 mainstay for years. They were able to build and develop guys and keep things flowing, along with having those top tier players. They're not going to be able to do that for a long time, and this is not really the team that has the money to move around and do a lot of things in free agency. So Pittsburgh's got to try and win the Stanley Cup right now, and I don't think that's going to happen this season. I think they're probably going to end up missing the playoffs, and it's just going to be a really rough time for fans in the Steel City and beyond. This is a really bad situation that's been mismanaged by previous general managers, and Dubas is now left to clean up the mess.
Yeah, that's look, he's in a tough spot, and I'm still wondering about just how great a GM he will be and can be and is, because of the fact that, look, why are the Leafs in salary cap hell right now? Because Kyle Dubas, on bended knee, boys to men style, to every friggin' player on that Leaf roster, as far as just giving them and cap and be, just whatever you want, I'll give it to you, and it's just, and put him in a really bad spot. And maybe that's a young GM, maybe a little naive and a little bit fearful of some of these agents that are just, tough negotiators. Maybe it's something to do with that. But
and the fans too. The fan base. The fan base is not ready to go through a rebuild again like they went through in the early 2000s. Now, granted, that was a much more drastic rebuild because the team had no money and there was no salary cap at that time. So things were dire the last time there was a rebuild. So there's PTSD amongst Penguins fans with hearing the term rebuild. I understand that. But you have to understand that everybody has to go through rebuild. And take it from a Hawks fan and a former Hawks fan who's about to speak in a minute. We know what happens when you let the inmates run the asylum. Kane and Taves, as great as they were with the Hawks, held on a little too long, were given a little bit too much money, and it put the Hawks in cap hell. And then you had to nickel and dime your way out of it. Pittsburgh's going to have to nickel and dime their way out of this situation in 2 to 3 years with players that are going into their 40s. That's a huge difference. So you can't even just
think about that Chris Letang contract again for us. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. What are you going to trade 39-year-old Chris Letang at the deadline to who? Who's competing for a cup that wants a 39-year-old defenseman? I don't get it. I just don't get it. So yeah, it's a mess. But the fans have to accept there's going to be a rebuild, and the longer you delay it, the worse it's going to be.
The thing with Chris Letang is he can still skate, he can still put up some numbers, but the defensive side of the puck for him has declined like you couldn't believe. It's unfortunate, and he can still put up numbers though, and skate. But my goodness,
so what, you make him a fourth line forward at some point? because you can't have your number one defenseman not be a good defenseman.
No, and there's been too many times he's beaten to the net and beaten with speed and coughing up the puck, and just it was too much last year. It was hard to watch, actually, at times. Chris Letang in his own end with some of the horrific play at times from him in his own zone. And you got that guy for how many more years now still at his age? How old is he now? He's 37. You got him now for still another, what, 4 or 5 years?
He'll be 42. He'll be 42 when it's gonna, if he plays through the rest of this contract, he'll be 42 at the end of that season.
Who's taking that contract off your hands in a trade? Who?
No one.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Unless you have some team that completely some other team that's doing what Pittsburgh should be doing now, and they bottomed out and they need salary to avoid the floor. So maybe Minnesota in 3 years, or Washington in 3 years is doing something like that. I don't know.
Melissa, I've got more to say, but we'll get Melissa in here to get her thoughts on the Pittsburgh Penguins first. Melissa, what do you think?
No,
Is
I
this
think
the mess we think it is?
Alex, that was pretty spot on to exactly what I'm thinking. You know, as a fan, you look at this team and you say to yourself, okay, I probably have another 2 more years just to enjoy seeing what Sidney Crosby can do on the ice. And that's all you got, you know. I think in the mindset that a lot of fans obviously want their teams to make the playoffs. But then when you look at the roster and you see what other teams are doing, you see what the Devils are doing, you see what the Red Wings are doing, you see all these other teams that are missing the playoffs last year, but are coming back stronger. And you kind of look at your team and say, okay, so we're adding another, 32-year-old on the team, or I'm adding this, but we have Sidney Crosby, he's going to make everybody look good as possible. So it's more of a enjoy it while you can stage, but long term, like you said, 5 years from now, I do not even want to know where this team is going to be at, because it's going to probably be a disaster when it comes to that rebuild. So for me, I appreciate that Sid stayed and that he did his superstition extension, the $8.7 million. I appreciate that. But I got to think positive. I do think that if they can avoid some injuries last year, that's what really killed them. We saw them finally play the last month of the season. I am not a fan of Tristan Jarry, as you know, Ian. I always loved your rant when they lost. I think the one time when they lost to the Islanders in the playoffs, that was the last ride. To me, when I saw that happen, I said this was the team that could have made it to the Stanley Cup, and they didn't. So the following year and the other years have been rough. But really what this team needs to figure out is who's going to be on that top line. You mentioned Beauvillier. Maybe Drew O'Connor might come up. I personally like him. I think that he did a lot of good things last year. But the player who I'm going to be most high on this year is going to be Bunting. I think that last year he had, it was like 18 points in 21 games. He really made a name for himself on that second line with Malkin. I don't think he's going to move up to line one just because he did so well with Malkin. I think they're going to keep him there. So it's a matter of who do they want to move to line one. And you got to clean up the power play. What are you going to do cleaning that up? Because, that was embarrassing last year. I think that you even had an own net goal where they were trying to get players off the ice and they scored on their own goal when they pulled the goalie. And that to me, you have Erik Karlsson who's running that, he did terrible with that last year. So they need to figure that out. That's the most important factor, I think, is the power play. If you can't figure that out, you're not making the playoffs.
Yep.
I would agree with that. It's mind-boggling when you got Karlsson and Letang on the blue line. You've got Crosby and you got Rust and Raquel and Malkin up front. Bunting was a good power play. I mean, you've got weapons galore on that. That power play never should have been a fucking problem last year for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And yet it was maybe their biggest problem for a large part of the season when it was just running so bad, at one point, like 30 plus consecutive power play opportunities without a goal, without a conversion, for the Penguins. And it's mind-boggling that they had something like that with the personnel that they have at their disposal, because that was the one thing going into last year. Everyone said the one thing we don't have to worry about with Pittsburgh is their ability to score goals on the power play. Well, what did we have to end up worrying about? Oh yeah, the ability to score goals, and especially the power play.
And here's the big thing, right? The Penguins run a 1D 4-forward set for their power plays. So their defensemen are Letang and Karlsson, meaning that if you're having them being the offensive puck movers and they aren't coming back on defense, are you going to have to now get one of your stay-at-home defensemen and essentially just play a regular line on your power play? Now you're only using 3 forwards. You're defeating the entire purpose of having a power play by having these two guys. You might at some point have to run 5 forwards because you're having 2 defensemen who are basically playing like forwards but can't go back on defense. And that's unacceptable. Like I said, you have this much offensive talent, you should be able to put a power play together. But the fact that they're kind of stuck at where they are from the blue line perspective, there's not much wiggle room they have unless they do something really radical and drastic. So that's the thing. And Mike Sullivan seems to be a guy who's steadfast in his ways, knows this group, been there for a while, so he's not going to just rock the boat completely when the boat needs to be almost flipped over at this point.
No doubt.
Yeah. And I think Carlson had more freedom too at the Sharks with that. And then when he came in, Pittsburgh has a completely different power play design, and he's used to just running that and not pushing and getting passed back. But you saw him beat multiple times, and you look at it and you're like, why is he so lazy back there? But it's because he's pushing, and then that's what happened. So I think
he's lazy defensively. He's not lazy offensively. I've always said that
defensively, and that was a shock to me. I thought that he would do a little better. I think he had half the points he did when he was in San Jose. So that was, he's got to really, step it up as well. But again, they have a lot of issues. It's not just like, fix the power play. It's like, okay, you got to fix the power play. You got to fix your goaltender situation. You got to fix, your age. You got to fix your cap space. You've got a lot on the list. And you see other teams that do have old players like the Capitals. I think that they made some good moves in the offseason, and they might be a little more competitive. You see teams like that, and you think, they're all going to be on the bubble, probably competing for that last playoff spot, the last month. And if Penguins aren't healthy at the beginning of the year like they were last year, then they're going to be struggling, So it's all about keeping them healthy and then having depth, which they don't really have if they do go down.
No, there's no doubt. Alex hit on a great point about putting a defensive-minded blue liner now maybe on the power play, because there were times when Letang and Carlson were out there on that power play. Not only did they fail to get the puck in the zone and get the offensive zone cycle going on the power play, they'd cough it up and it would be turned over, and there's a shorthanded chance and sometimes a shorthanded goal given up by the Pittsburgh Penguins. Tied for the most shorthanded goals given up last season, Pittsburgh with Montreal in the NHL. Right. So it tells you all you need to know about how disastrous the power play was. Tied for the most shorthanded goals allowed, the Pittsburgh Penguins last season. So clearly the power play is a point of concern and a point of emphasis that's got to get cleaned up. That shit's got to get cleaned up in a hurry for them this season. No question.
And Ryan Graves isn't going to do anything for them. He's someone he's been a complete, but I think the best was when he was out last year. They actually started doing better defensively. So when he comes back, we'll see what happens there.
He needs a good defenseman with him, and right now they got him with our guy, Ebony and St. Ivany here, Jack St. Ivany for the Penguins. Like, that's a young guy. He can't be counted on to pull Ryan Graves to be a better player. He's a young guy. Right. He's got, 12, 14 games in the NHL, St. Ivany. You're putting him with St. Ivany? I mean, put him with someone that maybe gets the best out of him, someone with experience, someone with ability to play a lot of minutes at this stage of his career in the NHL. I can't do that. So I'm a little bit. So that's a concerning third pair for me. I'll tell you that right now. And this is not St. Ivany. This is Graves more so. And I worry about that third pair. I worry about Grzelcyk too, because I said it earlier. When Boston wants not really much to do with re-signing you, that's a red flag to me.
And they need a blue line.
They know what they're doing on the blue line.
Yeah. There's a team, like I said, that always keeps their cupboard stocked with blue liners. Yeah. And now for them, like I said, when they get rid of somebody, chances are
a Boston guy too, Matt Grzelcyk, and they did not rush to pick up the phone and say, "Yeah, Matt, let's get that new contract done." No, they let him walk in free agency, and eventually Pittsburgh signed him. Yeah, plus, he goes from playing for his hometown team, which has been a perennial winner and playoff team, and now you go to this Pittsburgh team. I'm not saying he's going to, throw the season in Pittsburgh, Grzelcyk, but I think just from a motivational, stimulated to wake up and be excited to play and do your job every night, I can't imagine he is nearly as excited here in Pittsburgh as he would be in Boston. Hometown team and winner that is going to be in the mix. Now what?
I hope he is.
You better
He'll
hope
be on
he's
my
a good
list.
defenseman. Yeah. But that's the thing,
He'll fit
Melissa.
right in with his age, though. I'll tell you that.
They can't afford
Yeah,
him
right.
to be weaker or lesser than he was in Boston.
No.
Because if it's a horse shit season for Matt Grzelcyk, to go with St. Ivany, a big fat question mark because he's so young. Graves, we aren't convinced. Letang's fallen off defensively big time. Carlson doesn't give you anything defensively. Who's going to shut you down defensively on this blue line if Grzelcyk goes in the tank? Like that's what scares me.
Lots of
big
overs.
Yeah. Especially, and if Jari and Nedeljkovic don't have a better season in net collectively, absolutely. That's why I think overs are probably.
But we say lots of overs, but then we just talk about how this power play can't get their head out of their ass. Now, yes, they're giving up shorthanded goals, but at this point, everything trends to be just fading the Penguins in games. If they're anywhere within a pick 'em range, I'm going against them more nights than not.
No, I hear you on that. Let me just look up what their, you know what? Last year, there were 82 regular season games. Five of their totals pushed, but 77 games where there was a decision with their totals. 42 unders, 35 overs for Pittsburgh last year. They were actually more of an under team, and because of the offensive doldrums and the power play sucking.
Yeah.
There you go.
It makes sense. So overs early in the year, and then as things wear down, maybe start looking at unders late. Especially if there's any injuries to the top six forwards, then you're looking at all unders.
I still think early you're right. Overs are the play because they know they have to fix that power play because nothing good is going to happen for Pittsburgh this season unless the power play is addressed, fixed, and improved. Simple as that.
100%.
Has to, especially with what they've got. Sidney Crosby, you've still got people that can make it happen offensively there.
Sidney Crosby and Michael Bunting power play points early in the year. Those would be some props to maybe circle and look at.
Yeah, that would
those
be
great.
great.
Two guys to get things rolling on the power play.
Before we wrap it up, I've got to acknowledge Sidney Crosby's season last year. Like, it was just spectacular. For a guy that's now 37 to have the season he did, he did everything in his power to will that. Remember that Penguins team? We counted them out with that disastrous, I think it was a February or March run that they had, and it was a disaster, and we thought they were out of it. And then there they come charging down the last 2-3 weeks of the season and get close to making the playoffs and just fall short. That was Sidney Crosby carrying the team on his back the entire time to try to get them in. I mean, at his age, to put up 42 goals, 52 assists, 94 points, the most points he's had in a season since 2018, 2019. Just a spectacular effort from Sidney Crosby last year. Now, the concern is there anywhere to go but down for those numbers for Sidney Crosby this year? He's another year older. Can you duplicate that? Can you replicate that kind of season now? A year older, 94 points, 82 games, 93 points in 82 games the year before that. Like, he's been great, the last couple of years. And they are going to need him to be every bit as good, if not even better, to make the playoffs. That's a must. Malkin can't have a slow start. Bunting, Raquel, and Rust, that group has to be consistent offensively. Can you get anything out of Beauvillier? If that happens, that can make Pittsburgh a bit bigger threat to make the playoffs. Can the blue line shut it down? That's the biggest concern. I don't see it, but let's say they do. They play over their heads. They learn how to play some defense, block shots, box out in front of the net, do all that, the little things defensively, the details, forwards help, back checking. And then Tristan Jarry has one of the best seasons of his career this season. Unexpectedly. I don't think it's going to happen, but let's say it does. If all those things I just said happen, Crosby another monster year, you get Rust, Bunting, Malkin not having a slow start, you get something out of Beauvillier, the defense all of a sudden figures out how to block shots, defend in front of the net, play much better defensively, and Jarry plays at a top 5, top 10 goalie level in the league this year. If all of those things can happen, can you say Pittsburgh can make the playoffs? Yes, there's probably a scenario they can, but that is just asking way too much in my opinion, and I don't see it.
So you need pigs to fly and lightning in a bottle at the exact same time. Okay.
There you go. That's your scenario.
I need a lot.
Yeah. That's your scenario.
But
I
if
think, for the
Sid believes
Pittsburgh.
it, that's what he believes, probably. I'm sure that's what he's thinking every day.
I don't know if he believes in the possibility of this team doing anything as much as he believes in I'm a Pittsburgh Penguin for life, and I just don't want to uproot. Even with concerns and questions about this team's viability as a true contender right now. That's probably where he's at. He's just too loyal to the franchise, to the emblem, to the Pits, to the city, to the community, and to the franchise. And that's honorable, man. In a day where everyone jumps at the money and jumps at the chance to win championships, you got to respect that. Like it's not something you see every day anymore in pro sports. And Sidney Crosby definitely loyal and staying with the Pittsburgh Penguins. The dogs are barking, so that's a sign that it's time to wrap it up. But Melissa, we'll go to you for any final thoughts, words, and comments you want to make on Pittsburgh before we wrap it up.
No, I think you guys did great with the layout. You didn't really need me too much here, but I agree with everything that was said. I think that as a fan, I'm going to take this season in. I'm going to think positive strides here. And, maybe they'll have that fun last month playoff rush that I enjoyed as a fan last year, but then got crushed when they didn't get in. But I'm excited just for kind of to see how they play against some of these other teams that were in this smaller situation, and now they're rebuilding and coming back. So do I think the Penguins are going to be in the playoffs? No. Do I hope that they will? Yes. But will I ever stop watching them? No. So I'm going to just kind of take it in and let's Sid do the magic. You got to trust in the captain and see what he has to show us. Maybe he'll prove us all wrong. And we'll talk in June, and all excited for him. So we'll see. But appreciate you having me on, and this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
No doubt. And Melissa, of course, is awaiting the birth of her next child. So again, it's probably just any time now. We're talking a matter of days or weeks right now at this point. So Melissa, we wish you all the best with that. And the delivery when it arrives, and hopefully we will have a delivery of a lot more Melissa Cunningham on the Ice Guys show this upcoming season.
I'll be able to drink on the next live bet stream.
There you go.
We can all drink to that.
Water.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And by the way, that first live bet cast of the season is Frozen Frenzy night. So make sure you mark the calendar.
Exciting.
Tuesday, October 22nd. That's the night where you got the games every 15 minutes, starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, going all night, games every 15 minutes, every team in the league in action. Definitely looking forward to that. It only makes sense to make that the first live betcast of the season. Frozen Frenzy on Tuesday, October 22nd. Great stuff. Really fascinating team to talk about, the Pittsburgh Penguins, on this video. For Alex B. Smith and Melissa Cunningham, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been your Pittsburgh Penguins team season preview video as 32 teams in 32 days rolls along right here on the Ice Guys.